Hey, what's good, cannabis investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from October 7th to the 13th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, you can subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos. Try to think of these videos as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the US cannabis industry. Identify top US MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now based on their current market caps and new markets coming online like Florida and Pennsylvania, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. Just want to give you all a heads up that I'm going to be out of town next weekend, and then the following weekend I'm also going to be out of town for a work conference. And so I will not be making another video until November 3rd. And so I apologize in advance if you watch my channel regularly. I really appreciate you if you do. And while I'm sure lots of good news and nonsense news is going to happen from now until then, I should be back November 3rd in order to cover the best of what did happen and then anticipate ultimately what really matters, the decision in Florida. But with that, we're going to start with some small state updates. Still chugging along as Montana licensed cannabis stores sold $27 million worth of product in September. And so while this was nice to see, it was a slight dip from the record-breaking $29.7 million sold in August, which we saw out of most states setting new records into August past July. It is on par with the $28 million sold in September of 2023. And so year-to-date, sales for cannabis total around $250 million, bringing all-time sales since January 2022's adult launch to $865.8 million. Very impressive. They will join the billion-dollar club in 2025 at that rate, while August marks the 19th consecutive month that sales has surpassed $25 million. And so, furthermore, a breakdown of tax revenue as distributed by the state, if you're interested. All the links will be in the comments. While moving along to Maine, as they saw $21 million in cannabis sales during September, surpassing 400,000 transactions with this total amount, apparently. And so with that, Maine sales year-to-date total has reached an impressive $183.2 million from 3,406,206 transactions, according to the Maine Office of Cannabis Policy. While September sales were strong, around 1 million more than September of 2023, they reflected a decline from August, again another record-setting month, which saw 23.9 million in sales. So more info here if you wanted to pause to read. I will put the raw link to the Maine Office of Cannabis Policy data in the comments as well. Delaware received over 1,200 applications for cannabis business licenses, including 800 for retail outlets. And so this looks to be the total number from August 19th to September 30th, while the state netted $4 million from these application fees, so they must be loving that. And of course, if you give people the opportunity, they're going to want to join in if you let them. And so the state will hold an initial lottery to award cultivation licenses on October 24th, so we'll keep you updated, with a retail-only lottery planned for late November or early December, where more than half the applications submitted were for open retailer and social equity retailer licenses, so we'll see how that plays out over time, while a commissioner noted that the office received considerably more applications than expected. Who knew cannabis was popular, right? When you give people the chance. And so, New Cannabis Ventures, an update out in New York. The main thing is we're happy to see that New York's finally turning it around after so long, and reported here their sales continue to surge. Unfortunately, New York's going to be one of the fastest growing markets in 2024, and it's about damn time. After all the bad press and lawsuits, it's forced the Office of Cannabis Management to actually open up legal outlets to sell the real flower. And I would just say that this timing is going to look really good alongside Florida, as New York's another market of 20 million people or so. And so I shared this in my last week's video, but it was noted that roughly 2 weeks through October, they were at 60 million or so in sales, which highlights that they're on pace to eclipse the record-breaking August month. So a bit more down here if you're interested, but it is worth noting that weekly sales increasing by 10 million since May. That's very considerable, at least from this data point that they shared on October 10th. While, again, the biggest driver, 3 months ago, we reported that there were 144 legal adult use stores in the state. Now there are 210. The more stores you open, the more you're going to bring in, of course, legal revenue as Americans get to vote for legal cannabis with their dollars. And so more info here if you wanted to pause to read, but things are finally looking better in New York. Well, worth sharing this. It's an interesting one as Florida medical cannabis market faces a big risk because no doubt looking at the state data, it's interesting to see how much the patient growth has slowed over time considerably since like March of this year, less than 10% growth month over month, whereas in the past we'd see almost 50% growth, or I'd say quarter over quarter. It looks like it's measuring every 2 months down there. Obviously, something worth noting. You'd want to see the growth continue, although of course adult use is right on the horizon. Now, if we take a look at this chart here, the patient growth number is still growing month over month, though facing dips here and there. Maybe that's when they clean up their database, who knows, though it has not stopped, so that's one thing to point out. Now, what's interesting, though, is even though the growth is slowing considerably, The main thing, unit growth remains strong. As we reported, even in September, in my last week's video, Florida did see a record number of sales even up from August the month before that, even up from July the month before that, and Florida is still a medical-only market, right? So, of course, being driven by a large population, all that ultimately matters is what happens in November, and if Floridians end up voting yes and making adult use legal going forward. And so all links will be in the comments. Just a reminder, the biggest thing we're riding on, ultimately, I don't think the rest of the catalysts matter that much if this doesn't go the way of the people. And so crossing my fingers and toes as if that's going to make any sort of a difference. Hopefully they don't get stuck. Either way, all eyes are going to be on Florida in November. And so just a reminder, Curaleaf is one of 25 companies that are licensed to sell cannabis. Therefore, by definition, it's not a monopoly. And fun fact, if yes3 goes through, apparently there are 22 more licenses ready for issue, which would actually create more equal access to opportunity. It's not going to be as equal because obviously companies will have a head start. Plus the cherry on top from the dank informer, an additional unlimited amount of licenses can be issued should the Florida legislature decide to work in the best interest of the American people. And so I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but they've showed their true colors already, and we doubt that they're going to make any sort of push on that. And so some MSO news before we get into studies. Curaleaf to report third quarter 2024 financial and operational results on November 6th. Last week we got it reported that Green Thumb and Verano will share their Q3 earnings on November 7th. Now Curaleaf is a day ahead of them with aftermarket reporting on November 6th, so lots to look forward to next month. Well, just wanted to share this briefly from Benzinga. Take it with a grain of salt because this site is crap, but wanted to share a bit of the information that happened at the recent conference. As Curaleaf's Boris Jordan says, cannabis company has made massive leap, expects European business to double next year despite market risks. Now, of course, take what Boris says with a grain of salt. We appreciate him for being straight and honest with us a lot of the time, but he's also made a lot of claims that haven't necessarily come to fruition. Not that they're in his control, right? It's up to a lot of governments and regulators, a lot of factors to also play ball. Main thing though, Curaleaf gives investors exposure to a diversified portfolio of assets and geography, Jordan said. Along with its strong markets in Florida and Arizona, Curaleaf is seeing early success in its European expansion. The company is expected to generate sales of over $100 million in Europe this year on close to 50% margins. So take that with a grain of salt, but that's the latest from BoJo on Curaleaf. While we got this update out of TerrAscend, they will also be hosting their Q3 earnings on November 6th as well at 5 p.m., so the same time as Curaleaf. And so a day ahead of Green Thumb and Verano too. Well, True opening another med shop in Hollandale Beach, Florida, and they had their grand opening yesterday. And so I'm not exactly sure the numbers offhand, but I think this might be 140 something in Florida. Well, 200 and something nationwide for the company. Of course, happy to expand. Well, it's cheap for them in anticipation of a big yes on 3 win in November. So we'll see how this plays out, but more information here if you're interested in what Truleaf's got going on. I shared this timely update as more stores are back open after Hurricane Milton closures, and that looked like a devastating storm. And so obviously thoughts and prayers and hopefully lots of aid is going out to those in Florida to help get them back on their feet. Hopefully the damages and losses weren't too large. But the main thing, I have no doubt that Truleaf is probably providing a lot more aid and help to local Floridians than anything that the Biden admin and the federal government's currently doing. And so at least a good number back up in line, providing cannabis and a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative to a lot of people probably struggling right now. And with that, from Jesse Redmond, someone that went to the Benzinga conference last week, figured I'd share his 3 main takeaways. Number 1, institutions continue to do work but are not making allocations. Schedule 3 in Florida will accelerate the process. In theory, yes, that is the plan. We also thought the Dems getting voted in, maybe keeping their campaign elections, maybe New York, New Jersey coming online would force the hand of safe banking from Schmuck and Booker, who represent those states. Sadly, it didn't. But it seems like we're at a tipping point that's too large to ignore, and all that we're really waiting on is Florida and then the ALJ hearing, hopefully to go in the way of the government, who did confirm cannabis being a medicine. Well, number 2, hemp was the hottest topic. Most operators are evaluating how to potentially participate in the intoxicating hemp market. How fortunate. And 3, M&A will accelerate. Will moves be made pre or post Florida? Does the CEO turnover accelerate consolidation? Multiple CEOs told me once a deal is done, others will quickly follow. And so most likely post Florida as opposed to pre, but that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. Moving along, though, from normal, as adults seeking cannabis-related advice seldom refer to healthcare providers or government agencies. Yeah, it's no surprise after all the lies. And so researchers with the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor surveyed over 1,100 U.S. adults regarding where they obtain cannabis-related info. Respondents were most likely to obtain info from either friends or family or from websites. They were least likely to obtain information from medical providers or government agencies. If you Google the Tuskegee experiments or MK Ultra, anything like that, yeah, you'd understand why. Normal's deputy director was not surprised by the survey's results. Historically, government-affiliated sources have either embellished or outright lied about cannabis and its effects, he said. So it's no wonder that the public doesn't consider them to be credible sources for cannabis-related information, among many other things now, given the sad deterioration of quality out of the mainstream media over the last 15 years, as if they're trying to make everyone stupid and more emotional and divided. And so with that, though, from the conversation, relaying what we already know, and the process is underway, although they just want to use the word could because they never want to give us a straight answer, do they? DEA could reclassify cannabis to a less restrictive category. And again, a reminder, the process is underway for them to actually do it, so not the best choice of word, though a drug policy expert weighs in on the pros and cons. And so while I've covered this over time on my channel, I invite you to pause to read if you're interested. Obviously, cannabis never belonged in the Schedule 1 in the first place, and the best outcome we could hope for is just outright descheduling, but sadly, the government doesn't want to give up that sort of control. And so I invite you to pause to read, but what rescheduling would mean for cannabis, we don't know until we get confirmation that the DEA and DOJ are actually going to do their jobs and get this into Schedule 3 in the meantime. While medical uses for cannabis, I'm going to go through many studies shortly, but if you've watched my channels, we've gone through many of these studies. So much promise, we just need to get the handcuffs off so we can research while balancing risks and benefits. Main thing, all of these benefits add up to cannabis users having an overall lower rate of premature death than non-users. Who would have thunk it? Certainly a better substance than alcohol to be habitually using. And so another one from Green Market Report. Hard to imagine the rescheduling process isn't going to get done because it's already underway, and why would you start it and do all that work if you're not intending to finish it? Feds stand firm on nationwide cannabis prohibition in appeals court. So this came out this past week as the U.S. Department of Justice on Thursday urged a federal appeals court to uphold the nationwide ban on cannabis, arguing that Congress maintains broad authority to regulate cannabis despite its legalization in many states, according to Law 360. That's their official argument. It's like, how about shut up and just deschedule cannabis? That's what all the science points to. That would certainly right all the past wrongs that you guys have perpetrated. But this is, again, unfortunately, the shitty news we kind of get in between all the good news out of the state stories that keep the waters very, very muddy. And so what does this ultimately mean? I'm not exactly sure. And they add, Congress is acting well within its authority to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper to regulate commerce among the several states, the Justice Department argued, citing Supreme Court precedent. And that's easy to say when Congress hasn't done anything for the state legal cannabis industry in however many years, and ultimately all they've done is legalize the synthetic hemp-derived crap that is now causing a lot of unintended consequences. And so the case, led by Massachusetts retailer Canna Provisions and backed by the likes of Verano, aims to revive a lawsuit dismissed by a lower court in July. As U.S. District Judge Mark Mastrioni ruled then that only the Supreme Court could overturn its 2005 decision in Gonzalez v. Reich, which upheld federal cannabis prohibition. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but up until the Chevron deference overturning earlier this year, the U.S. Supreme Court would not be able to change their decision, and not saying that they will. Obviously, it's a wild card and we're not holding our breaths, but since the Chevron deference has been overturned, technically, the Supreme Court could deem that federal prohibition should be overturned now as well because they don't have to defer to the DEA and DOJ to be the authority on what's a medicine and what's not, given cannabis is obviously a medicine, right? So some extra details. Let me know in the comments if you know more and what you think this case could mean for the rescheduling process, because the other main takeaway is that the DOJ is basically saying, hey, stop fucking with our Schedule 3 process in the background and not backing down on this case at all. And so from what I understand, though, the First Circuit could hear oral arguments in the case later this year. And so we'll keep you updated, of course. All links in the comments. On to studies highlighting why we ought to free the plant and deschedule it outright sooner than later from The Guardian. As some vapes claiming to be cannabis contain synthetic cannabinoid. Study finds, as University of Bath researchers found 7 vaporizers sourced from the U.S. contained dangerous SE compound. Now, it's worth noting, I read through the article and could not find where or who it was sourced from in the U.S., so we don't know if it was legal outlets. But the other thing worth noting is all the studies I featured in my videos over time are results derived from the female cannabis plant, the medicinal plant that gets sold out of legal adult use dispensaries where there are legal markets, and not the hemp-derived crap. And so, of course, it's worth noting, it's good to have more studies on that sort of, on those synthetic substances, and so we'll put the raw link in the comments if you want to go through that. But it notes that 7 vaporizers claiming to contain cannabis actually contained a much more dangerous synthetic cannabinoid compound. And so clearly, these aren't coming from legal adult use dispensaries, although sure, in the past, LA Weekly did expose California for some outlets were selling crap. And so it's of course important to actually regulate the industry and make sure they're selling healthy products. But all that to say is analysis of the vapes revealed that all of them contained the SC5FMDMBPICA. There are hundreds of different SCs officially named with these letter number combinations and referred to colloquially as K2 spice and other slang terms. Unlike natural cannabis, they're frequently associated with severe negative outcomes, including seizures and fatal overdoses. In England and Wales, SCs were responsible for nearly half of unnatural prison deaths from 2015 to 2020. That's a wild stat. So thank you, The Guardian, for actually mentioning that unlike natural cannabis, they do point out the difference, as these SCs are also illegal in the UK and the US, but they're not because of this next sentence, technically. Still, they're showing up in the unregulated US hemp market that emerged as a result of the 2018 Farm Bill, where Congress did their only act of legalizing, which inadvertently legalized all cannabis-derived products and, sadly, these unhealthy synthetic compounds. And so with that, just to point out, Peace Labs has studied the contents of vapes seized from a person who was arrested after experiencing schizophrenia-like symptoms. Again, so where did that person get it? We'd love to know that more information. But her lab found that vapes contain semi-synthetic cannabinoids like THCO, another compound that we know to be very unhealthy. So great article by The Guardian here highlighting at least all the dangers that come with that synthetic crap, hence why you want to actually go to a legal outlet to get the medicinal cannabis plant if you want the best results, ultimately. But on to some studies from Frontiers. Cannabis for chronic low back pain, associations with pain, mood, and intoxication. While I have shared this one before, I just want to highlight some of the best studies with the most surprising findings. And so if you're new to my videos, hopefully you haven't seen these before and it does teach you something. But pause to read the methods and results. Main thing, the findings support the short-term analgesic effects of THC and anxiolytic effects of CBD, and further suggest that orally administered THC and CBD should continue to be evaluated for the potential to provide both acute and extended relief from chronic low back pain. Deschedule the damn plant. And so more information here if you wanted to pause to read. A very detailed one though. Well, from PubMed, another one from September, but certainly surprising results that should make most people's jaws drop. Substituting medical cannabis for medications among patients with rheumatic conditions in the US and Canada. And just to look up what rheumatic or rheumatism meant, any disease marked by inflammation in the pain in the joints, muscles, fibrous tissue, especially rheumatoid arthritis. It's as if our endocannabinoid systems are screaming for cannabis later in life, right? And so I invite you to pause to read the objective methods. The results, though, among 763 participants, 62.5 reported substituting medical cannabis products for medications, including non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, opioids, sleep aids, and muscle relaxants. And this is what scares Big Pharma the most. Following substitution, most participants reported decreased or cessation in medication use outright because the plant can just substitute it. Not fully completely, but there's a lot of promise and why we ought to deschedule so we could figure out all of the potential. And so on to the new studies though. Cannabis pill may reduce agitation in people with Alzheimer's disease from Medical News Today. And so I featured a video in my last week's video or a clip of a woman who basically got her life back after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's and starting to take CBD in the form of medication. And so, of course, this raw study will be put in the comments as well, but to highlight, agitation is a common problem that people with Alzheimer's disease experience. Researchers are interested in finding the best ways to manage agitation, including determining which medications may be the most helpful, and CBD seems to be pretty damn good at that. And highlighting one new study suggests that the drug dronabinol, and what's wild is that that's basically the already only existing FDA-approved cannabis medicine. And why is the cannabis plant still stuck in the Schedule 1, even as a classified substance? Make it make sense. It doesn't, right? But all that to point out, derived from cannabis could help reduce agitation in people with Alzheimer's disease without significantly increasing the risk for adverse events. Yes, and so can providing equal access to the medicinal cannabis plant for as many people as possible. All that to point out, of course, massive findings, and this should outright clear the way to study a whole lot more. Sadly, it doesn't, but hopefully we're getting closer to that. Schedule 3 does become a reality. Cannabis compound shows promising potential as anti-cancer agents. And so this is written off of a study I shared a few weeks back. And so just highlighting that, hey, I'm bringing you the good health news at least a few weeks before any of the mainstream outlets. The review by an international team of researchers found several ways that compounds in cannabis can affect cancer, including limiting the growth and spread of tumors and other benefits. And so essentially highlighting a bit more about the review. And so it's not a new study, but it's taking all the findings we have and highlighting, hey, we need to research this associated with potential cancer relief. And so this is the study, again, an older one that I've shared, but figured I would share this cool visual as the, thank you, Dan Conformer, the action mechanism of cannabinoid receptors. And so obviously I look at this, it's kind of like hieroglyphics. If you're interested and you understand this, please help explain like I'm 5 in the comments. But cannabis definitely seems to do work in whatever it does, and this is just in reference to that Forbes article. Well, we got a few new ones from PubMed, this one from October 10th. The impact of rec cannabis legalization on cannabis-related acute care events among adults adults with schizophrenia. And so I invite you to pause to read. Funny though, the purpose, of course, because doctors seem to think patients with schizophrenia have a higher risk of cannabis use disorder and may be uniquely affected by the legalization of recreational cannabis. Fortunately, the conclusions kind of speak to the opposite, as despite higher baseline rates of acute care utilization among patients with schizophrenia, cannabis legalization was associated with significant reductions, particularly during phase 1. Our findings suggest that regulatory measures accompanying legalization could enhance the quality and safety of cannabis products. Hey, don't tax the companies so much. Let them keep more profits so that they can invest in safety, potentially leading to fewer adverse health outcomes in vulnerable patient populations. Further research is needed, but I mean, it's pretty impressive when you note that in phase 1 was associated with decrease in cannabis-related, mental health-related, and cannabis psychosis-related ED events. It does not go up when you legalize. So take that, prohibitionists. While for this one from PubMed, October 9th, association between cannabis use and physical activity in the U.S. based on legalization and health status. And we need more and more findings like this, which blow that lazy stoner stereotype out of the water. I invite you to pause to read, but looking at the use of cannabis in physical activity have mixed results. In past studies, the conclusions here, public policy and personal health behaviors may improve with the findings that legal medical cannabis and legal rec cannabis promotes greater physical activity in those experiencing chronic medical conditions. And, well, yeah, then they cover it. Legal rec cannabis promotes even more so greater physical activity in those not experiencing chronic medical conditions. What do you know? The data doesn't lie. You love to see it. Deschedule the plant. Well, for marijuana moment, lesser-known cannabis compounds like CBG and THCV are promising treatments for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, study says. So as of October 8th, now this is the raw study. I'll put the link in the comments, but it was a very short one, highlighting that in addition to THC and CBD produced by the cannabis plant, a diverse array of lesser-known phytocannabinoids, along with terpenes, flavonoids, and alkaloids, may also demonstrate diverse pharmacological activities and could offer therapeutic applications. Such compounds include THC, CBDV, and CBG. I'm sure you've heard about a lot of these. I know this one seems to be helpful for sleep. And so their antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and neuromodulatory effects position them as promising agents in treating neurodegenerative disorders. And the fact that this is in the Schedule 1 and we can't study this is the real crime. And so I'll try and put the, or I already put the raw link in the data. Main thing is that you can pause to read if you're interested. It's a long one, but lots of good information in here. As for once, Marijuana Moment doing a good job in finding a lot of the details that you can't actually just get in the preprint. And so with that last study, from MDPI, harnessing cannabis sativa oil for enhanced skin wound healing, the role of reactive oxygen species regulation. And this one is from August, September. I think I missed it though, so figured I would just share. Cannabis sativa emerges as a noteworthy candidate for its medicinal potential, particularly in wound healing. This review article explores the efficacy of cannabis oil in reducing reactive oxygen species during the healing, sounds like infection, during the healing of acute and chronic wounds, comparing to standard treatments. And so, yeah, review emphasizes the ongoing research and the future potential of cannabis oil in dermatological treatments, highlighting through clinical studies and patent updates. Of course, patent updates. More focus on patent than patients, of course. Interesting graphic here if you're interested. Otherwise, all the links will be in the comments. Well, just an update out of the States. Sad, unfortunate, as out of Oregon, apparently a cannabis dispensary employee was arrested for using his Second Amendment rights, possibly not rights that are reserved in Oregon anymore, to blast away two would-be robbers, which, I mean, hey, I'd probably do the same thing. And sadly, he's getting charged with second-degree murder, it looks like. So, again, could be avoided had Schmuck passed the Safe Banking Act a couple years ago when he first got the votes. Sadly, we're still waiting, so it could have been easily avoided had Congress actually done anything to work in the best interest of the legal industry for once. And these are the names of the suspected robbers. Take from that what you will. And just ironic, the North Portland store had been targeted by at least 4 previous armed robberies since 2022, state records show. The only thing allowing this discrimination to continue to run rampant is Congress's lack of action and unwillingness to work in the best interest of the American people. So it's just sad, but that's still the reality when nothing's changed. Well, from Marijuana Moment, Nebraska medical cannabis legalization ballot initiative that will be voted on in November would create nearly $1 billion in economic benefits by 2030. Analysis finds yes, right? That is why the states want to do this. Such a boom in many ways. So just to highlight, amid a state challenge to a pair of Nebraska medical cannabis legalization ballot initiatives, a top cannabis law firm has released an analysis projecting that the reform would create over $925 million in economic benefits for the state through 2030. The analysis for the measures championed by the campaign Nebraska's Families for Medical Cannabis found that the state could see medical cannabis patient registrations exceed 56,000 by 2028 and 93,000 by 2030. And of course, they could see higher numbers if they facilitated the normalization more quickly. Based on the estimates from Vincente LLP, that translates into more than 152 million in medical cannabis sales by 2030 and over 925 million in new economic activity, including jobs and revenue and other industries involved in it by the end of that year. Partnerships, all that can come from it. And so obviously we know the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition speak for itself, so you can pause to read otherwise. Links in the comments. Ultimately, just have to see what the Nebraska people vote for in November. While Tilray Brands reported their Q1 2025 financial results, and they were less than stellar, though a few things worth noting. They are now reporting in US dollars and not in Canadian dollars. So Tilray did achieve 13% year-over-year growth, generating record Q1 net revenue of 200 million USD because they are now an alcohol company and not necessarily a cannabis company they started out as. Obviously, I still own them just because I have a lot of shares that I should have sold a long time ago, though I definitely think in the next cycle we're going to see them rise up again. That's not advice, though. That's just me sharing why I still own them and haven't sold yet for a loss. Ultimately, though, they highlight German medical cannabis flower revenue increased by 50% following legalization, but the sad reality is going through their numbers, their revenue in Germany from medical cannabis flower decreased. So for whatever reason, they're not getting that market share, which is not ideal. And then, of course, they think they're going to gain big by launching into this hemp market far later than a lot of other people. And so we will see what happens. Little bit of a global tour before we end off. Spain introduces draft world decree to regulate medical cannabis as of October 8th. And so a bit of an update. Spain patients could soon have access to medical cannabis as regulators push forward with a new bill. However, its use is expected to be strictly limited to specific medical conditions, highlighting the cautious approach being taken to a plant that has never killed anybody when alcohol is legal and available. Silly. After the request of the Subcommittee for the Health and Consumer Affairs Commission in 2021, the Ministry of Health of Spain introduced last week a draft royal decree for public hearing that seeks to regulate medical cannabis. And with this decree, the government aims to provide patients who do not respond to authorized treatments, so basically if something doesn't work for you, then cannabis can be the next best option with a supply of standard cannabis medicines. And so we'll update you if this makes any progress and has any chance of being passed. But, good to see more normalization and less discrimination towards this safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. While from the business of cannabis, Poland nearly doubles medical cannabis import limits for 2024 as demand continues to surge. And so great news is Poland is set to significantly increase the import cap on medical cannabis based on continually expanding demand in what is fast becoming one of Europe's most exciting cannabis markets. So you love to hear it. Poland coming out of nowhere. I'm going to keep a closer eye on them now. But what happened? In response to a public information request submitted in September, the GIF stated that the estimated annual demand for cannabis in 2024 had been revised, increasing by 5.2 million grams. And that increased the original 6 tons to just over 11 tons. And so rapid market growth, a bit more of a breakdown here, and you love to see it. It's hard to stop once you give it to the people. But between 2019 and 2023, the amount of medical cannabis sold increased dramatically from 26,000 grams in 2019 to 2.5 million grams in 2023, with 2023 showing a dramatic increase. And so if that's not some foreshadowing for what's to come in Poland, I don't know what is. Levels of growth representing compound annual growth rate of 189.2% for patients numbers and 214.6% for the number of grams sold. And so more information here if you are interested. Of course, links are in the comments, but hopefully they can reduce any sort of supply chain blockages that are apparently still stuck and really set upon this old bullshit single convention on narcotics drugs of 1961. It's been a minute since I brought that up. That's the other one big thing standing in the way of free cannabis in Europe. Well, from business of cannabis again, German medical cannabis market to top 420 million euros in 2024 amid second wave of German cannabis. And while this sounds good, it's just so minuscule to what it could be. BOC Business of Cannabis, the report notes that in 2017, there was a forecast of 800,000 cannabis patients in Germany, but the actual market has evolved quite differently. How is the second wave of German cannabis developing differently from these initial projections? And so, of course, you can pause to read, though it's annoying we don't get any exact numbers of the growth, though I believe it's over in the millions now, which was to be expected. Since April 1, how has Germany's medical cannabis market exploded in size? How has Germany's medical cannabis market has exploded in size? Okay, it's not just me, it was a typo. What challenges remain for businesses hoping to capitalize on the flourishing market? What challenges remain? There's no legal adult use commercial market. That is the only challenge, essentially. Of course, you can pause to read. When Canada legalized cannabis in 2018, the market was soon saturated with supply, and businesses struggled to compete because they only opened 50 shops in the first 2 years, at least in the market with 14 million people. How does Germany differ? Well, they didn't create a legal adult use market. That's how they differ. So, of course, you can pause to read the details, but for the short, sweet answer, what impact are these factors likely to have on product prices? This is an interesting new one. Of course, you can pause to read that bit. But what I didn't expect is that out of all the companies that Germany's buying their cannabis from, seems Canada is the most expensive versus all these other ones they can get cannabis from. So no doubt that's why Canada and LPs don't have as big of a market share as they should or as they could have. So it's an opportunity there. While cultivation associations have been spreading throughout many German states, what business opportunities are available in the strictly regulated market? Not much until we move to Pillar 2 and create a commercial adult use market, which it only makes sense, right? So more information here if you wanted to go through the numbers of applications over time from different parts of Germany as well, just so you can see that clearly. While last few bits, many had hoped for full legalization of cannabis, but the CanG bill is significantly more restrictive. What is the outlook for an expansion of cannabis liberalization with Pillar 2? You can pause to read, but I just can't take any German politician's word for it at this point. Of course, you can pause to read the rest. But because Germany is so restrictive, it's likely not going to have an impact on any other states, and they're all just taking their sweet times. Hopefully Poland will outshine a lot of the rest. Well, with that, a video from Pablo Zuanik and Associates speaking to a few members of the German market, giving more information on where that's at and what they're expecting to come. So again, I'm not focusing too much on this just because I'm so disappointed by how slow and how little it has evolved. Though if you are interested, of course, there is some opportunity there. This link will be in the comments if you wanted to go through that. Well, last but not least, just figured I would share this interesting one from the Betting Bruiser. As normalization is happening globally, while slowly but surely and always longer than we expected, even in Kyoto, Japan, people are starting to embrace cannabis for its many amazing needs, of course, mainly CBD focused here, but we know that East Asia, huge on the skincare products and industry, they definitely want to get a head start. This isn't a movement tethered to North America and Europe. The tides are changing everywhere. It's just been very frustrating having to wait so long for that tipping point to finally be reached. All eyes will be on Florida, the election, and Q3 earnings come November to see if these kickstart the next bull market. And as always, this is not advice. Plan accordingly for your own situations, and if you don't think this is going to happen, let me know why in the comments. But you would be a fool, I think, to miss out at this point. But that is it for today's episode. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. Of course, subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos. I'll be back likely November 3rd